Very good evening to one and all. Hope everyone is safe during this pandemic. Welcome to the international webinar of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College in association with Kent State University, Ohio, US, an international webinar on global standards in library science 3. At the outset, I am happy to inform you all that our Evening Degree College is celebrating its Golden Jubilee year. On behalf of our college, we congratulate all the stakeholders. Now, I request Dr. Nagesh YG, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, to welcome and introduce all the dignitaries to this international webinar.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to one and all. I take this opportunity to welcome all for this international webinar in association with Kent State University, Ohio, US. At the outset, I would like to thank all the office bearers of this esteemed institution and welcome all of them. Now, I would like to introduce and welcome Dr. Marianne Martens, who is rendering a theme address. Madam is an associate professor at Kent State University School of Information. Martens is a dual citizen of Denmark and the United States, and her work is international in scope. Her research examines the interconnected fields of young people literacy, youth services, librarianship, and publishing for young people from historical perspectives to a special focus on digital youth. Here, her research interests converge at the intersection of books and technology in new literacy formats and include the impact of digital reading experiences and the multi-literacies required to interpret non-linear multimodal materials as well as visible reading audiences and the information they share. She is the author of publishers, readers, and digital engagement, participatory forums, and young adult publishing, and the forever fandom of Harry Potter, balancing fan agency and corporate control, Cambridge University Press. She served as Kent State University principal investigator on a USAID, a grant with American University of Nigeria and Columbia University, a Center for Sustainable Development that work to improve literacy in Northeast Nigeria. Previously, Martens was Vice President at North-South Books in New York. Madam, on behalf of Seshadripuram Medical Trust, I welcome you for this webinar.
Thank you so much.
Further, I would like to introduce and welcome another theme speaker, Dr. K. Rama Patnaik, Librarian, Indian Institute of Management, Bengaluru, India. Madam has a doctoral degree in Library and Information Science from the Andhra University of Visakhapatnam, India, and the master degree and bachelor degree in Library and Information Science from Andhra University. Her thesis on marketing of library and information services in Indian libraries, present trends and future perspectives was adjudicated as an excellent thesis by the School of Information Science, Michigan University in 2002. She is with the IIMB for more than 11 years now, and before joining IIM Bangalore, she was with the two leading national law schools libraries. She was a regular resource person for all the workshops conducted by Council for Social Development under the aegis of Indian Council of Social Science Research for user instruction sessions to faculty and research scholars on plagiarism, academic ethics, review of literature using online content for research during 2011 to 2015. She was awarded the Emerald Alliance Research Fund awarded for Best Research Proposal among South Asian librarians in 2012 for writing a research proposal. Dr. Patnaik is also a regular speaker at various national conferences. She has published one book and 15 papers in reputed journals, even course writer for InflibNet, E-Patashala, University of Hyderabad, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Open University programs on library and information science. Her areas of professional interest are integrating technology in information services, current trends in management of electronic resources, and creating subject profiles with the instructional design using LibGuides. She was recently awarded as the Best Librarian by ManLibNet, a network of business school libraries in India. Madam, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I wholeheartedly welcome you for this webinar. I would like to welcome our beloved principal, sir, Professor N.S. Satish, sir. Welcome you, sir. I welcome all the office bearers and the trustees of Seshadripuram Educational Trust and all the principals of our sister institutions, other heads of the institutions, conveners, volunteers, and all participants who have registered across the globe. Now, I welcome Dhareppa Konnur, sir, Program Coordinator, and Rajat B.S. sir, Coordinator, AQAC, and Head Department of Commerce. Now, I welcome Yogananda, sir, Librarian, Seshadripuram Union Degree College. And finally, I welcome our own teaching and administrative faculties to this webinar. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, sir, for welcoming all. I welcome you for this international webinar, sir. Now I request Dr. Marianne, Assistant Professor, Kent State University, School of Information, Ohio, US, to enlighten us with her keynote address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I will do my best. Oh, hold on. You got the white screen. Hold on. Try again. This one. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes, madam, we can see you.
Thank you so much for your very kind invitation and your welcome, inviting me to speak here today. As you know, I'm Marianne Martens. I'm a professor at Kent State University School of Information. I study all things related to youth and librarianship. And today I'm going to share some of my research on establishing taste. Who decides what is good in terms of reading, and how do they do so? So I think if you are a librarian in India, you might have heard of this guy, S.R. Ranganathan. He is an internationally known Indian librarian who lived from 1892 to 1972 and was a huge influence on librarianship around the world. His 5 laws of library science from 1931 are still accepted as a definitive statement of library service and are still taught in master's programs around the world. The ideas of every reader, his or her book, and every book its reader say a lot about the idea of taste and represent an evolution beyond the initial idea of librarianship as the field first developed in the United States. How do we find out which book is for which reader? This talk is going to examine that just a little bit further. So in terms of library history, deciding what is good and what is available, when we talk about books for young people, important questions to ask are who determines what's good and who determines what's available and who is in charge of getting books into the hands of children. So long before the internet, it was really clear who was in charge when it came to books for young people. There were key, very influential gatekeepers. For example, teachers, librarians, publishers, reviewers, and ultimately parents and guardians. As the field of children's librarianship evolved in the United States at the turn of the 20th century, the field was embedded with goals and ideals about Americanizing new immigrants, about using books to improve the minds of young people. And certain books fit the criteria and many others did not. So by the time young people got to the books, a lot of gatekeepers had already been involved in decision-making about what counts as good reading. So Carroll Moore is perhaps one of the most famous librarians from the United States, and she served as the main librarian at the New York Public Library from 1906 to 1941. Librarians such as Carroll Moore wielded enormous power over what was read in the United States. In fact, she famously had a stamp called "Not Recommended for Purchase by Expert," and she was that expert and wasn't afraid to use her stamp. Books that she didn't approve of, including books that eventually did become classics in the United States, such as Stuart Little, that she didn't like, that still managed to make it through. She was also a reviewer She reviewed for a journal called The Three Owls, and she was also an author. So she wrote her own stories about her famous Nicholas doll. And even though she was very short in stature, she had a towering authority, and book editors in New York were terrified of her. As the field of children's librarianship grew, publishers realized there was a market to supply books. The separate field of publishing in the US began with a school teacher called Louise Seaman Bechtel, and she was hired to run the first independent children's department at Macmillan in 1918. At the time, the types of jobs available to women included teachers, librarians, nurses, secretaries, and interesting for the time, because men who dominated the publishing industry and didn't care about books for children, publishing also became a field that women could work in. So eventually, because men weren't as interested in anything that was for children, women were able to dominate fields of children's publishing and children's librarianship. And these fields were interconnected indeed. Children's publishers relied on reviewers writing good reviews of their books, and often librarians served as those reviewers, and more importantly, librarians served as the people buying those books. And many alternated. Anne Carroll Moore was a librarian who also trained other librarians, some of whom, like Margaret K. McElderry, also became children's editors. Reviewers, too, were very important in this shaping children's taste in children's books field. Ruth Hill Viggers was a reviewer who worked for the Hornbook magazine from 1958 until 1967. And the Hornbook was a highly influential and highly regarded journal. She also wrote a column called Not Recommended, in which she pointed fingers at specific publishing houses and specific series that she felt were just not appropriate for young people to read. The Hornbook, under her successor, also published articles by a librarian, one who was also trained by Anne Carroll Moore, Frances Clark Sayers, who famously lambasted the entire Disney company for taking classic folk tales and turning them into slick animated versions. So if you think about it, getting a negative vote from someone like Anne Carroll Moore, who was responsible for buying all the books for all the branches of the New York Public Library, or a reviewer like Ruth Hill Viggers, was actually an early form of cancel culture, which we will get to a little later. So for the better part of the 20th century, while the clothing might have changed a little bit, this is what the dissemination of literature for young people looked like in the United States. Books trickled down to their readers via several layers of gatekeepers, many of whom had their own agenda. And at the top of the agenda was protecting the minds of young people. Those gatekeepers were obsessed with getting quality literature into the hands of children, and the definition of literature changed with the times. For example, in the 50s, at the peak of the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union, librarians like Margaret Alexander Edwards, a noted young adult librarian, promoted science and nonfiction books. And Ruth Hill Viggers from the Hornbook, she had a regular column with the scientist Isaac Asimov. The fields of children's literature and librarianship were predominantly white, and with some noted exceptions. For example, Anne Carroll Moore hired a librarian, the great Augusta Baker, who was a librarian in Harlem. And also, Pura Belpre was the first Puerto Rican librarian in New York. She also started under Anne Carroll Moore, and she spent most of her career working in Harlem and the South Bronx, neighborhoods that were predominantly Latino. She also eventually became well known as a storyteller and author as well. And as for the publishing industry, it remained mostly white for much of the 20th century. And I would argue it continues to struggle with representation to this day. So in the later part of the 20th century, readers' voices began to have a bigger role. For content creators, knowing what consumers want or what they like is a really good way to create products that consumers in turn will buy. So we start to have these emerging fan voices. And at the early part of the the later part of the 20th century, there were these fandoms that were emerging prior to something very famous, which is Harry Potter. And one way is through comics. So comics were definitely a form of media that was very much disparaged by those librarians. Comics were censored in the United States. If you can see at the top right-hand corner of the Superman comic here, you see it says approved by the Comics Code Authority. And so that was something that was really, they were actually vetted and censored very often. But young people were huge fans of comics and bought them with all their pocket money and bought them in large numbers. So there was this fan engagement as well between comic publishers and fans, because fans would write to comic editors and sometimes they would print those letters within the comics as well. There were also competitions where fans could, suggest ideas for content and things like that. So there was this kind of reader, content creator engagement through comics. Later, there was another type that I'm sure you may be familiar with as well, and that is Star Trek. So when we get to television, there are different fandoms that start to emerge where you also have this kind of feedback from the consumers. And Star Trek fandom is in a realm of its own. It's been extensively studied. It's been written about widely by media scholar Henry Jenkins. And this idea of participating, one of the things that people really get out of it is this sense of belonging. So that is a key part of fandoms, whether you are in a literary fandom, a TV fandom, a comics fandom, or other. But this idea that there's this insider, outsider model, and if you're on the inside participating, that is very, very engaging. But I would argue that with all of these, there was really nothing that compared to the fandom associated with Harry Potter. Here you have the unique combination of a really good book series with a rich universe that quickly expanded into a transmedia property, and combined with the advent of the internet and a very active fan base, there was this absolute explosion of participation. For many years, the books were published annually and the characters grew up with those who read the books. First published in 1997, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in the UK, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in the US, was a game changer on so many levels. In the US, the series created the need for a separate children's bestseller list at the New York Times because the titles were constantly taking over the first 4 entries on the adult list. Harry Potter was and is a crossover title, and it was read by like nothing before and possibly nothing ever. J.K. Rowling was on the Forbes list of wealthiest women, but she fell off the list because she donated so much to charity. And as a contemporary blockbuster that appealed to boys and girls, children and adults, Harry Potter presents a unique example of the ultimate transmedia property. It spans multiple media channels, from books to movies to licensed merchandise to an amusement park, a play, a movie studio, and a museum. And it's not even just about pop culture, because there also was an exhibit at the British Library. And if you think about a children's series having that kind of cultural capital, that's pretty amazing. And Harry Potter also extends into academic work with courses and publications and conferences. And because of the world building within the series, it lends itself to fan participation on a really, really large scale. It also conveniently coincided with a boom in internet use. In 1997, that was the first time Harry Potter was published, but in October 1998, the launch of fanfiction.net happened. So the internet provides this incredible vehicle for Harry Potter fans' expression, and Harry Potter provided the perfect transmedia property, which could be extended across media platforms, online and via fans' labor. And as social media sites grew along with the series, fans were able to participate in more and more ways. They joined fan groups on Facebook. They wrote fan fiction on the various fan sites, and they tweeted about it. They participated in the Pottermore site starting in 2012. And suddenly fans' voices, in this case, readers' voices, were heard loud and clear. And there's even a phenomenon known as the Harry Potter generation. And while this classification is fluid because of the crossover readership of the series. If we think of people who are around 10 years old when the series started, those initial fans are in their 30s today, and many continue to be active in Harry Potter fandom. One of the most important things that unites fans around Harry Potter fandom, however they choose to define that for themselves, is their love for the series. So fans' participation via the internet and the love for the series meant that publishers, Bloomsbury in the UK, Scholastic in the US, were getting fans immaterial and effective labor, which means labor done free of charge and out of love for the series. And you cannot compare that kind of fan marketing to any marketing that any publisher could ever do. So as Harry Potter readers engage with the brand, they're also acting as extensions of the brand themselves. But despite this distinction, arguably Harry Potter consumers are empowered consumers, and we are going to see how they do so. So fandom connects young people around the products they love. Fan groups, far from being an individualistic, mindless consumption of media, can have deep and meaningful impact on fans. And one of the most important things that unites fans around Harry Potter fandom, however they choose to participate, is this love. So the town I live in, Kent, Ohio, where Kent State University is, used to run pre-pandemic, we hope they do so after the pandemic, an annual Harry Potter festival, but don't call it a Harry Potter festival because Warner Brothers doesn't want that anymore. So it's now called the Wizarding World of Kent. And there's tons and tons of these festivals around the United States. Every year there are some. They're no longer allowed to be called anything from the series. So most are called something around wizards and witches and magic instead. And yet these festivals combine literary interests with pop culture, and they're perfect for engagement across the community, including at the library. Unlike highly commercial and profitable events like, for example, San Diego's famous Comic-Con, festivals like Kent's are unregulated, volunteer-driven, and completely dependent upon fans' contributions. Yet the relationship is still a codependent one between fans and the corporation, but the ultimate power rests with Warner Brothers, which has the power and authority to shut down festivals like Kent's. So libraries are able to continue to operate versions of these festivals because they're truly non-commercial. Kent Free Public Library has served as a community partner in the annual festival since it started. And libraries across the US also have their own versions, all now carefully avoiding the naming of anything that conflicts with Warner Brothers. Local libraries even host comic cons that are all examples of how young adult librarians get feedback from teens and respond to their interests. While librarians have long hosted teen advisory boards to get input from teens about their tastes and their interests, social media is now a really important place, not only for teen input, but for community-wide information sharing. And this is going to be shared in the next session. Oh, so again, this is another way that Harry Potter fans participate, the community that exists around Potter fans, whether they're participating in fan fiction, communities, festivals, volunteering, or playing Quidditch. And there are tons of Quidditch leagues across the US as well. British scholar Ranjana Das describes that sense of belonging to a group of others with whom one feels solidarity and bonding to an entire generation. And even though Das was interviewing young people in the UK in her study, people who identify obviously strongly with elements from the UK, typical British things like food and double-decker buses in the streets of London, American readers very secretly or not so secretly are often big Anglophiles, and they identify with these things too from books and movies. So fan fiction writers, another way that fans have expressed themselves in terms of their investment in the Harry Potter series. And if you just look at AO3, just from last February, 300,000 fan fictions just about Harry Potter, and on fanfiction.net, the same, 92,000, huge numbers all around Harry Potter specifically. Fan fiction gives fans the opportunity to write the stories they want to read, to include characters that look like them, to make existing characters interact with them. Rowling has often been criticized on social media platforms for revising her canon. stating years after publication that Dumbledore was actually gay or Hermione was actually Black. But with fan fiction, fans are able to make the stories their own. Arising out of this movement towards inclusivity, there are two recent developments across social media platforms that I'll talk about next. So the Pottermore site was launched in 2011. And on this site, fans could read about the latest news, play games, get sorted into houses, and communicate with each other. And later, the site owners realized that the core audience wasn't quite what they had expected all along. In fact, an analysis of this site found that users were actually young adult and female, not younger children, and they used mobile devices and not laptops. So starting in April 2015, the site owners disabled the original site and relaunched the site on September 22nd. Logically, it follows that the redesigned site would present a shift to mobile platforms. It eliminated gaming, including the very popular sorting hat feature, and it most importantly disabled comments. It also shifted the focus from the youngest readers of the series to those older readers who'd been growing up with the books. Games and participatory elements were replaced with backstories and more information about upcoming Potter-related events. The contents were rolling-centered, and the site provided her with a forum for communicating directly with the fans in a controlled and comment-free environment. Yet fans weren't really happy with the relaunch. And in reaction to it, the fans took action. And this shows a new kind of fan activism that happened as well. Within 48 hours of the relaunch, there were 5,000 tweets on Twitter. While many were excited about the content, just as many were super unhappy. And those comments were in languages from around the world as well. Those who had participated in the gaming features of the earlier design felt robbed, wondering where all their virtual world items were. Where were their wands and their trunks and their potions and all the things that they had collected or earned on the site? By the end of September, the site owners were forced to acknowledge this discontent. When fans expressed their frustrations on social media, the Pottermore correspondent was suddenly launched as someone who would respond to select comments. By pushing fans' comments outside of the digital corral of the Pottermore site and onto social media, the site owners no longer had to worry about moderation. They didn't have to worry about bad behavior within the site. So by doing this, fans could still exercise their agency and be vocal as long as they did so outside the walls of the site. But shortly after relaunch, the Pottermore site owners were well aware that fans were really unhappy about certain things. And 4 months later, the sorting hat came back, wand selection was brought back, and this demonstrates the impact and the power of fans. Clearly, these were voices that had to be heard. Since then, Pottermore has moved on once again. In 2019, it quietly became the Wizarding World, and now it's a collaboration between Warner Brothers and Pottermore, allowing for the expansion beyond the Harry Potter brand. Beyond social media, technology allows readers to exhibit their own reading tastes in multiple venues, and two of these are Goodreads and Booktubers, which will be described next. So Goodreads is a peer-to-peer book reviewing site, and while it's impossible to know how many of the reviewers who claim to be children and teens actually are, it's certainly something that's changing the face of reviewing and creating online communities of readers who share their reading tastes with others. And by doing so, they provide a visible reader response to books, which previously had been invisible. So it's really fascinating to see. Other ways are booktubers. In some case, they're acting as bookish influencers, and these can have enormous power and reach as well, including in India. This image is from Book Geeks India. This woman has 19,000 subscribers, and she organized a year or so ago a mega collaboration of Indian booktubers for an Independence Day special. Booktubers in some cases act as online reading influencers. Many of them have commercial components. Some may or may not work for publishers. Some may or may not get free books or other compensation. So it chips away a little bit at the peer-to-peer recommendations, but it reflects some of the ways that publishers are understanding the power of peers. Fans can also use social media as a vehicle for social change. I mentioned earlier that the children's publishing industry still is not as diverse as it needs to be. And two social media movements are calling that out and working to change it. One was started by a group of children's and young adult authors, and that's the We Need Diverse Books movement. The other one, #OwnVoices, has been picked up by readers seeking representations in the books they read. We Need Diverse Books calls out the need for diversity within the community of young adult literature. It was started by authors Ellen O, Melinda Lowe, and Cindy Pond in 2014. And by now, this hashtag that they started, #We Need Diverse Books, now includes a website, an anthology, and a book award, and scholarships. The We Need Diverse Books movement and the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States all correlate with an increased call for authenticity in books for young people, in addition to representation. And speaking of authenticity, the Own Voices hashtag in the United States connects to many of the social issues faced in 2020 and still today, including an increased emphasis on social justice from race-related protests, immigration rights and violations thereof, LGBTQ rights, rights for people with disabilities, or highlighting inequity caused by a deepening digital divide at a time when many young people are learning from home with inadequate access to technology and the internet. The Own Voices hashtag is a response to this type of inequity, has helped raise awareness for the need for authenticity in books published for young people. With authenticity, the hashtag appeals to publishers to publish more insider voices and to librarians to make sure collections reflect such original voices. And when books featuring diverse characters are written by cultural outsiders, they should be anchored in research, preferably approved by an authenticity reader. And when they're not, they can expect to be called out on social media. Authors and publishers writing and publishing books about people in an ethnic group different from their own are criticized for being inauthentic. So what are readers looking for with Own Voices? And here's one example. Here's an example from Twitter of a reader who's looking for characters that are disabled paranormal main characters, or blind werewolves, or deaf vampires. And this slide shows praise for an Own Voices author. Helen Huang writes books that have characters who are both of Vietnamese descent and also autistic, and the author happens to be both as well. So one of the penalties of not following these emerging rules can be cancel culture. Cancel culture refers to the popular practice of withdrawing support for public figures and companies after they've done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming, but it also represents the ultimate way that fans and readers can stop supporting a public figure or a company via revenue earned by their otherwise positive attention. Similar to the example above, in which an author canceled her own book's publication, authors presenting unpopular views run the risk of being canceled. J.K. Rowling got in trouble in summer 2020 for sharing her anti-transgender views on Twitter. And ironically, many young fans who are part of the LGBTQ community are also fans of Harry Potter, exactly because the books provide space for these young people who are questioning their own identities and where they belong. The Harry Potter universe provides this space as the characters themselves have these questions. Are they muggles? Are they wizards? Are they insiders? Are they outsiders? As previously, Rowling was much criticized for canon revision via social media when she said that Albus Dumbledore was actually gay or Hermione was actually Black. In 2020, when she decided to speak out against transgender people, there was a huge backlash from the same community, and fans saw her as being inauthentic in her support of gay rights. And there have been lots of requests to cancel J.K. Rowling. But how much popularity has she lost? So in 2018, She had 14,500,000 followers on Twitter. And as of this morning, she had 14,100,000. So she's lost 400,000 followers, but she still has over 14 million followers. So while J.K. Rowling felt the need to speak out against trans rights and then double down on her very unpopular and unkind stance, we'll never really know why she did that. But the fans have responded in the best way possible via a Harry Potter fanzine, The Trans Affirming Magical Care. With this zine, cartoonists, digital artists, and writers are talking about the trans experience through the relationship with Hogwarts. In other words, it's full of the kind of art you won't see on Rowling's Twitter feed, but trust fans to take matters into their own hands and make it right. So while early librarians serving young people were considered to be child protectors and the role later progressed toward being youth advocates, this paper has presented some of the current trends in and around young adult librarianship in the United States. Elements of protectionism remain. Librarians continue as advocates, but contemporary youth services librarians in the US are as interested in supporting and improving young people's lives as ever. New dimensions of the field include supporting young people's career aspirations and incorporating social justice across all aspects of library service, from programming to outreach to collection development. The pandemic has put a particular spin on library service to young people, but libraries are in a unique position to support them via access to technology and access to programming that can help remove isolation. And in terms of finding and listening to young adults, social media allows young adult voices to be heard in ways that weren't possible before. When fans speak out on social media platforms, publishers and librarians who serve young people need to pay attention. Are publishing lists and library programs diverse and inclusive? And how are the terms diverse and inclusive defined? What about authenticity in terms of social media? Who is trending and why? Why is a popular author like J.K. Rowling in trouble? How will readers respond? It's up to publishers and librarians serving young people to collaborate with the young adults to find out more. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for enlightening us on the theme of the webinar. Now, I would request today's one more theme speaker, Dr. K. Rama Patnaik, ma'am, Librarian, Indian Institute of Management, Bengaluru, India, to address the webinar. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay, sorry, I think good evening to everyone, and I'm indeed very grateful to Professor Satish, Professor Konnur, and the librarian and all those who are associated in organizing this very useful theme of library science, very useful theme in library science. And congratulations to your college for celebrating this Golden Jubilee. And I'm indeed, very grateful for giving me an opportunity. It's indeed a privilege to be associated with this webinar. And today I'm going to talk on a topic which is very less discussed or may not be getting that much of importance as it should have been. And probably one of the reasons for libraries not getting the primacy, especially in academic space, or the shrinking space of interaction with the academics, especially in the institutes of higher education, whether it is colleges or universities. The assessment or the measuring the value is a very broad topic which requires some kind of expertise to understand how actually we could do it. What are the skills that are required? I think a new field that is emerging to, there is probably not much of education imparted in this area, especially in LI schools in India. It's called learning analytics. And anyway, the big data has entered into all streams, and we should be also, be rather more serious in giving some kind of importance in collecting the data and managing the data, or maybe using it, using the data for informed decisions, or or seeking funds. I think somewhere this culture is not yet backed up. What we usually do is what are the accreditation agencies are looking for, or what are the national standard agencies are looking for, and whether library has XYZ in terms of say technology or books or resources, or the chairs, the table, the furniture, the building. I think we are only looking at resources, but we are also not looking at how it has contributed for the growth or success of the institute. Somewhere I think the only measure to standardize a library is having XYZ, what is being prescribed either by the NAC or for other STEM institutes. I think there is a national level agency which I don't want to talk about, where it publishes a handbook and also recommends what a library should have. So given all that scenario, I thought I'll just talk about something which we are slowly trying to do it, though it's a vast ocean, and as I said, maybe requiring some kind of additional skills when you are intending to measure the value of your library. So, but I think these questions are usually asked: why should we measure? Because it is the heart of the library, at the heart of the institute, and it is supporting the institute in its research and learning objectives. And how do we? I mean, how the contribution of library could be measured? So, because there are a lot of intangible things that might come into picture. And is it also necessary to communicate the value? So I'll just briefly look at some of the things which I am also currently researching on. In fact, because my library budget is going on to increasing, I think 20 to 30% every year, and I find sometimes very difficult to canvas for additional resources. So if I ask for some resource, then there would be obviously associated questions like how this investment is going to help. But as I said, I'm just trying to build up a framework for my own library. Each library may have its own objectives of measuring the value, but we'll also look at how globally, or how libraries overall look at a larger picture of getting some kind of data in terms of the library contribution to the larger success of the institute. So given this, libraries being, as I said, why we should measure, I think being the cost center, they are always on high level of expenditure on resources, infrastructure and everything. And when it comes to resource cut, budget cut, I think they become the first casualty as compared to most other departments within an institute. That's what I have observed even with many of my peer libraries as well. So the secondly, then the huge investment of e-resources often stretches the budget, because it is not only about the content, then it is also on the infrastructure that we have to look at the internet facility, we have to look at the computers, we have to look at the bandwidth. So there are a lot of things that are associated with access, unless the print libraries. And libraries being always a passive source of repository, it is often under acknowledged or underrated for whatever value it contributes for the courses that are taught, or the learning, overall learning journey in the overall learning journey of a student, or the kind of support it provides to provides for research to the faculty, or the learning resources that it provides for teaching. So all these are often underrated, and the kind of effort that is put, or the time that is put, when you compare with the time that is already invested by the faculty or the students themselves, I think there's a huge gap. And many studies have already demonstrated about it, where the libraries, the effort and the time and the skills that we use for making a resource available is often under acknowledged, because we have never attempted even to measure how much time is saved, for providing some kind of content, which is very crucial. And that to providing in time, it's not like we are taking ages to provide something which is required for research. So those deadlines, meeting those deadlines with your own skills of locating information is, I find it most of the time it is under acknowledged. Not only me, maybe I think many of you could also resonate with my perspective on how our efforts, we don't even try to highlight it. We think that it's a noble profession, and we continue to do a selfless kind of service, even if we are not, complimented for what you do. And and these contemporary libraries these days require a lot of skills. I think many times I come across institutions which think that, ever since everything is available online and probably accessible at the click of mouse or internet, or having the open repositories, it opens up a huge stream of resources which are available for discovery for the students, and where the library intervention or library staff intervention for that matter is required, for providing these resources for their learning. So but what is not known probably to the administration or to the management or to the education leadership is the skills that a library leadership requires, not only in managing the budgets, because most of the time the digital library often convergence with the IT in terms of its content and access, and you are operating in a very complex settings. So this require a high level of skills, which again need to be recognized. And it is not just providing a computer and internet connectivity where you just go and click and get whatever you need to. Not only the conservation, the convergence of IT, but also the lot of other things that come into picture. The copyright, for instance, is often not taken so seriously in digital library, not so taken so seriously in print libraries, but now it become some kind of a primary function as far as digital libraries are concerned. So, and then the library role keep on evolving, in terms of the types of, the future, or maybe the complexities involved in scholarly communication, the research, the funding opportunities, the pedagogy. So every time, your ecosystem changes, then you are again challenged with a new set of skills that are required to manage the library. So these are all some of the efforts which I think are meant to be highlighted in whatever way we are given an opportunity, and how we need to curate this information over a period of time, and maybe annually or quarterly we just bring it to the notice of the administration about the contributions that we do make in terms of the institute's growth and success. So looking back again to what kind of value that can be measured, I am focusing on basically the library services, not on the overall impact of or the overall value of academic libraries for institution. I think that's actually a larger picture where the students' enrollment or the faculty research and other things come into picture. So if you look at the measuring the value of libraries, resources and services, how you're going to actually get these analytics at one place. Since most of the content, I think most of the libraries are spending their amount, the budgetary resources on getting the digital content, especially the higher institutions. I think somewhere whatever you purchase and how it is going to be used, this has to be analyzed with the data that that actually gives you information on how many downloads have happened, how many users have browsed for a specific session. So there are standards and protocols which publishers do subscribe to, and you get authentic data. So earlier this was not the case, and ever since the Counter project came into picture, I think many libraries are able to curate this data. So if you ask me what are the top 10 journals that are used in my library, probably I can get it in a click of mouse, because every month I download all the usage report in one place from various publishers and look at what are the top journals that are used by my community. And you also get what are the top read journals overall on a publisher website, that who is reading the the most you can say the most downloaded article, like that. So if you are curating the data of every transaction that happens in the library, whether it is the usage data, or it is the website visits, or it is about the circulation data, or it is about the seat occupancy, or it is about the bookings for Kindles, computers, or collaborative spaces, all this data actually gives you a picture of how you are going to how your library is being used. So earlier this was not the case. Sometimes what happens is giving this data on usage helps you to seek additional funds. As for instance, if my seat occupancy is always 100% at a specific time, and then students come to library and not get space to read, then I can make a case out of it, saying that okay, over a period of time, especially during the interim exams, the library seating is not just enough. So these data actually helped us. I think when I take an example of my library, I think most of my journal renewal retentions are based on this. And also I gather a lot of the turnover data which are in demand and then we still don't have access. So somewhere the compilation of the usage data also helps in taking decisions, not only in taking decisions on retentions of new subscriptions, but also measuring the value. And sometimes you also look at what are the research publications that are recently published by your faculty, and then how many of them are actually cited the resources that we subscribe to. So some kind of bibliometric study also will help to collate the relevance of your content. That also is another method of curating the usage and also relevance of your collection. So this is slowly catching up. I think many libraries are now actually capturing at least, if not anything, the journal usage data, and of course circulation statistics and all were all part of the academic library statistics. But public libraries also have done it for a long time in terms of the seat occupancy and also the circulation transactions. So this is one of the the major analytics that the libraries must focus on whenever I think you are seeking funds or trying to show the impact of your collections. Capturing this usage data from multiple directions, and also from all transactions that are happening in library in whatever way should be aiding you in measuring not only measuring your value, but also showing the contribution of your library in terms of the research productivity or the student academic journey. The other thing that usually is undertaken is for cost prohibitive projects, especially the return on investment. So if you are looking at large projects such as renovating library interiors or maybe the RFID based inventory, I think these are cost prohibitive projects where a lot of due diligence is expected of librarians. So if I am just saying that, okay, so many books are lost and I just want to implement RFID, maybe that is only one perspective of looking at why you need investment for implementing RFID technologies. So the cost benefit analysis may not be always on in terms of money or in terms of returns. I mean, returns in the sense like, how much money is saved in terms of time and all, but it also about the impact. So if I am actually implementing RFID technology not only for the loss of books, but also if I am implementing the technology because it will remove the large queues at the circulation desk, especially on weekends when a lot of students come to renew or take the books, or if I want to have some kind of self-checkout service where the staff productivity can be oriented into the services, and then rather spending time on issue and return of the books. I think that could also one of the case, but all this has to be properly measured when you're asking large amount of financial resources for this. So I will take an example of doing both the projects in my library. So we did, I think we did collate a lot of information on how many students are not able to issue the books because the shelving order was not proper, and how many books we lost in complete stock verification, and what is the cost of those books. And sometimes the books may not be available for purchase because they were seminal work and very old publications, and I think you can't measure the value of such books. And also on the staff productivity. I mean, these staff having the skills could have invested time in creating subject guides or providing research assistance rather than wasting their time on issues and returns. So over a period of time, we collected all this data and presented for a project, and then that is how we actually got the funds. The same is the case with library interiors. spending about 7 to 10 crores on renovating library units is of course not an easy task. And of course, the leadership has to be convinced about the contribution of library now, physical library, not the online, in implementing such large scale projects. So if your library is over a period of time is having observing decrease in footfalls and poor lighting and not having the these learning spaces which are which are in alignment with the instruction pedagogy or the learning the learning methods. So if people are asking about group study, collaborative study, and you are only providing silent zones, obviously your students would not be interested to come to library. So you look for similar spaces around the campus, and I have seen that most of the time they sit outside the library because in library we would not allow them to engage in any kind of discussion. So this also had stretched over a period of time. I think it took almost 7 years to collect all the feedback and engaging in multiple surveys and trying to understand that why the students' footfall in the library is decreasing. So that is how I think we got an opportunity to present all this data, and we also had this focus group interviews sometimes to understand the students' perspective on what are their expectations, because they spend hardly 2 years of time, and then there should be a set pattern, not that you are doing it once in a while. So a project of this nature requires actually a consolidated data spread across years to understand some kind of behavioral pattern when they are seeking some kind of changes in the physical structure of the library. So this ROI is very important, aspect. Maybe I think when I was first confronted with this question of whether you did the due diligence, then I understood that projects with such large investment often require some kind of return on investment studies to seek funding. And the other thing what we also do is, or maybe many libraries should be doing, as feedback and surveys. So when you develop questionnaires, I think quantitative studies or qualitative studies, this is one way of understanding the student's perspective. It's, when you're taking up the usage data, it is always passive, like it is not an active data that that will be the sole determining a factor in terms of measuring the impact. So all these usage data should also be corroborated with the feedback and the surveys, whether it is a one-to-one, group of focus interviews, or even at the reference desk. If students come and seek something, immediately you ask for a feedback. So it's like random, and sometimes it is like spread across 3 to 4 months to collect all the information. So this is something that is very crucial, which is already practiced, not from now, I think from ever since the libraries have existed. So these are some of the methods that help you to collate your usage data with the students' feedback, and it should be a kind of longitudinal to understand the impact, especially if you're looking at any particular aspect. Like if I'm trying to analyze the impact of the renovation and how it has helped to attract students, then it should be spread across years. Now we are collating it, I think 2 years ever since we have renovated, and then we are trying to collate. This pandemic has happened, and then we had to close down the library, but we have seen large number of students walking with the laptops, and then the seat occupancy is always 100%. After the classes are over, especially in the evenings. So the other thing what is recommended, of course, is benchmarking. You can develop your own key performance indicators. I think even in a staff assessment performance appraisals, we also ask them what would be the key performance indicator as far as their work is concerned. So the benchmarking can also happen with connecting with a peer comparison, like where we did one time the benchmarking with top business schools, trying to understand top business schools of the globe, trying to understand the content that is subscribed by us for business and company and industry information. So we found that about I think we compared with 5 leading business schools, and we found that about 60% of content is, is same as what they have done. And the services also, you look at the services, what are I mean, though the instruction, information literacy, instruction based literacy may not be so prevalent in India, but the traditional services what are imparted elsewhere, they are comparable. So benchmarking is also one way of looking at where do you stand in terms of the leading libraries about the resources and services. And this apart from the collection, what we also did is the print collection mapping. Sometimes what happens is, if your requisitions or if your book requisitions are not happening as they should be, and sometimes there are decline in one subject and there are more books titles purchased on a specific subject, and then why the interlibrary loan requests are getting more and more to those two libraries. So we did some kind of collection assessment with other IM libraries for a period of 5 years, and we found that we were lacking in about 5,000 titles, which are also frequently requested during the interlibrary loan statistics what we looked at. So benchmarking is also one of the important tools that need to be considered when you are trying to measure some kind of measuring the value of your library services. So I just look at what we do. Sometimes we also do this cost per usage analysis. This is a slide I borrowed from my annual report of library. If you look at what are the aggregators that we subscribe to over a period of 3 years, so the cost per usage is calculated in terms of downloads and the amount that is paid, and you just get this cost per usage kind of calculation. So this sometimes helps us to if in the survey results we are not getting many results, or even after undertaking it for 3 to 4 months before the actual renewal of resource. So this also helps us to assess whether the investment should continue in these resources while measuring the cost per usage of the resources. The same is the case, as I said, like whatever web links, whatever websites or guides or any other resource pack that you develop for your users to make them self-reliant, then you try to look at the page views and all. I think nowadays the Google Analytics is one of the things that helps us to view it, but we also subscribe to many of these PrinkShare products, which helps us to create subject guides or web links or resource guides on the fly, and then we try to collate how much of it is being viewed. So over a period of time, you will see that during lockdown, I think last year, whole of the last year, I think the website use was much more as compared to the previous year, that is 2019. The same is the case because most of the users were accessing remotely. You can see that the jump, the usage in 2019, it is 19,000, but where in 2020, it was about 54,000. So this was because of the lockdown, the physical library was closed and we had to replicate everything online. So the online is not just done within a day. Over a period of time, we try to promote the students to rely mostly on online content for latest information, and we used to develop a lot of guides. We also have discovery service and other tools which expand the visibility of the content, and then we used to chat with them. And I think during the lockdown we opened up all channels to contact us, and there were no specific times, and I think we were working all days and never taken a break to get in touch with our user community. And this shows the statistics about the remote access that was extended and promoted during the lockdown. Sometimes we also do this per capita expenditure, like how much of journals budget, how much of the budget is spent on journals and what are the total number of enrolled students. So this, I think, sometimes may not be a correct picture, but there are also other costs, associated with it, like the wages of staff. But to trigger some kind of discussion on how much is the spending is happening per student, is also help you to give a larger picture on the library fees that are collected from the students. So if you are if your student fees comprises so many factors like tuition fees and lab fees and all, probably the library fees should also I think the management should also look at the importance of library, and also how much the expenses are incurred per student when it comes to the complete subscription of journals. So we subscribe to more than say 10,000 journals, and this is the cost we do. And over a period of 3 years, we have seen that how the use for FT in lakhs is reflecting. So the return in investment, I also gave some examples. I think one example which catch my attention was about Hazelden Library, which was done in 1998, which I think is still retains its relevance because of the contemporary studies also showing the same kind of results. So usually, the one of the examples that was given is, the value of reference service based on professional fees and time spent, and the value of collection based on cost, not having resources available on site, and divide this by library budget. I think this was done by one of the professors by name Barbara. I think I have also given the source. So people who are looking at return on investment for libraries, I think can read this good case study that's available at ACRL site. And the feedback and surveys, I have mentioned only about a few pictures where we do it, especially for collection. I think one can do it on technology, on reference service, on collections, on learning spaces, on working hours. So when we develop a huge questionnaire, especially incorporating all these things, usually the students will not have that much of time to spend on it. We actually segregate into these areas, and then distribute brief or create some online link with a QR code scanner, and they can just scan it in mobile, and that is mobile friendly also. And mostly the rating on Likert scale, that also gives some kind of information on how we are able to meet to their expectations. There are actually instruments of survey where that LibCall is one of the things which are used extensively in libraries as in US. So that if you administer that, I think that will give an overall picture over a period of time how your resources have been used, and what is the service level expectancy, and where are the gaps. That means expectancy and actual dissemination, so the gap in the service quality. So these are the areas where you can actually take brief service. We always have a lot of issues with working hours. Usually students often demand 24/7, but now that we have all that required, all that information or all the infrastructure that is required for operating a 24/7 library without engaging any manpower. So maybe after lockdown we have to experiment with this. So this is the thing which is usually expected to done. And then the most important is communicating the value. So you have collected everything, but do you really get an opportunity to present it whenever there is an opportunity to showcase your library's impact? So even if you don't get it, I think you have to somewhere there may not be any formal opportunities, but somewhere whatever that is collected can be just sent as a mail showing that this is what my library been able to do it. So reporting and presenting is one of the aspects. Otherwise, I think whatever you are collecting the data or through questionnaire or feedback and all, if you keep it to yourself, and it will not be known to anyone. We get opportunities like in our annual appraisals we get, and we also get in faculty council meetings where the libraries a complete annual report is presented in terms of what are the key highlights, where the library has helped in contributing to a large extent, especially whether it is in the copyright assistance, whether it is getting the course material, or whether it is getting the right kind of resources for research or for journals, or undertaking a bibliometric study. So all that, whatever you have done over a period of time, should be presented in an annual report and then communicated to your leadership. And nowadays, I think most of the libraries, we also have this. We show it in form of infographics. I think we subscribe to a tool where all the data is actually harvested in one tool called LibInsight, and then we actually share the link with the leadership, especially the management, or with the deans, and when they click, they know that exactly what kind of MIS reports are collated over a period of time. So if you ask me how the budget has increased over a period of time, I think a graph will really tell how the increase has happened. And if you also look at the research papers over a period of time, so all this data and the money saved, I think this year we also showed how much money we saved actually with tough negotiations when we are actually subscribing to many databases. So the complete annual report, in whatever slides it comes, I think that figure should tell some kind of story about your library performance. That is when I think you get a value for, or maybe the prime or whatever the word that is used, that the heart of the institution. I think when it comes to getting resources, this annual report will definitely help in getting, not only getting resources, but also getting the importance, the academic space that libraries need to get in contemporary higher education scenario. So I was also talking about measuring the overall value. What the ACRL usually says is, you measure the value of librarians can develop some kind of framework for getting this done, like especially in the students' enrollment, in their graduation, retention, placements, internships, and marketability. And I think most of the time the students who spend that time within the library, then how you have actually helped in their journey, like how many literacy sessions they have attended, and those who have attended, what kind of grades they have received, or if you have created one bibliography, or if you have created one resource pack for a student's assignment or thesis, then how it has helped. So all that information about students' journey or students' engagement with library can be collated. Same is the case with research productivity of faculty, or the tenure, the promotions, or how much grants it received, and what kind of collaboration the faculty had with library, whether for the information literacy sessions or for creating a kind of assessment on a specific topic. This is usually done in undergraduate, colleges, or where the undergraduate education is imparted. And then how much of the content is used as the course packs of the learning resource, exactly how many book chapters or how many journal articles, how many reports, or whatever that is used for the course pack. So all this will give you some kind of impression on the library contribution, especially with terms to students and faculty, and of course overall the institution. I think most of the ranking agencies look at the library budget, and also this ratio of the student and faculty ratio, and what kind of societal impact the research has created. So for instance, if somebody has done on disability access, did it help in any way to create some kind of legislative measures for their mitigation? So these are the three framework on which you can build up the resource for showing the actual value of libraries. So what I had discussed earlier is about services, but if you look at the library's overall contribution, the value to the institution, I think these three parameters would help you to understand or collate information, especially in students or faculty success and overall success of the institution. So some of the data points probably is, as I said, if you look at the circulation data, database usage, ebook usage, multimedia usage, digital usage, or the reference data, especially the physical desk transactions, students, faculty, library consultations, reference chat, SMS transactions. So all these are potential sources of data that help you to collate it and give some kind of information about how your library is able to contribute to overall success of not only the students, faculty, but of the institution. So I think I have come to an end of my lecture, so I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for transmitting our mindset towards the theme of the webinar. Now the floor is open for the interaction. As we are running out of time, we take up only few questions which we have received from the chat box. Now the question is for Marianne ma'am. Ma'am, can I? Marianne ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah. Ma'am, the question is it good to welcome too much of technology in library?
Is it good to welcome too much technology in libraries? I think technology is part of the library mediascape at this point, but of course it depends on where your library is, what the budget is, and everything else. So, definitely my talk was from the perspective of libraries that are including technology. Of course, there are many around the world that don't have technology. Does that answer the question?
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, one more question. What would be the expectations from futuristic library?
Was that for me or was that for my colleague?
For Marianne, ma'am. For you, ma'am.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. What would be the expectations from a futuristic library?
From a future library for young adults?
Yes, ma'am.
The expectations in terms of developing collections, perhaps?
The expectations from the futuristic library, ma'am.
From the futuristic library. From the futuristic library, I mean, I definitely think that technology is the way to go. I learned from a project I was working on in Nigeria in a very low tech or no tech environment that many people even had cell phones, and that WhatsApp was hugely popular, and that people were communicating and sharing and interacting and engaging with all kinds of media via WhatsApp. And I certainly think that that kind of thing is going to expand. I don't think there'll be less. I think, as internet access expands and the technology becomes cheaper, I think more and more people will be using it. So I don't think it's going away. I think it's definitely something that is going to expand and become more accessible in the future. And I think it's something that librarians and libraries have to deal with. I think, our two talks were so different, but I think also from Professor Rama that it's very clear that technology has been huge during the pandemic. And I think we've all learned some very new and interesting uses that are going to continue.
Thank you, ma'am. My next question is to Rama Patnaik, ma'am. Ma'am, can I?
Yeah, please.
Ma'am, in terms of global standards, where does India stands?
Global standards of global standard for libraries?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't think. I think we have our standards have not been developed for a long time, and we are. I think somewhere there is absence of some kind of leadership which can actually develop this kind of standards and then prescribe for libraries. Each the profession is going on one way and the LI schools on the other. So I will not rank it, or I think it's not comparable at all. We have a long way to go.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much to Dr. Marianne, ma'am, and Dr. K. Ramanayak, ma'am, for answering the questions of the participants. Now we send the feedback form link now in the chat box as well as to your registered mail, which will be active for next 48 hours. Kindly fill the same and send back for e-certificate. The e-certificate will reach you from 7 to 10 days. Very shortly, we will meet in one more international webinar of our evening college, that is on 28th April 2021, coming Wednesday. The topic is Innovations in Entrepreneurship in association with Cranfield University, UK. The invitation to register to this webinar will be sent to your mail ID. Now I request Mr. Abhilash G, Assistant Professor, Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, to render vote of thanks. Over to you, Abhilash, sir.
It is my proud privilege to propose vote of thanks on behalf of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. At the outset, I would like to thank Kent State University, School of Information, United States, and Indian Institute of Management for associating with us to conduct this international webinar. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to theme speaker, Dr. Marianne Martens, Associate Professor, Kent State University School of Information, United States, for associating with us to conduct this international webinar successfully. I would like to thank you for sharing your insights on the topic, establishing taste in literature for youth, from arbiters of taste to reader fans. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Rama Patnaik of Indian Institute of Management for giving an excellent theme talk on crafting a culture of assessment and measuring the value of libraries. Thank you, madam, for your valuable words. My special thanks to our beloved young and energetic principal, Professor N.S. Satish sir, who is the robust of our Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. I would like to thank Dhareppa Konnur, Program Coordinator, Rajat BS, Coordinator, IQAC, who have helped us to materialize this webinar. I express our gratitude to all the principals, conveners, and members of our sister institutions and other colleges, academicians, research scholars, students, and delegates across the globe for participating in this webinar. We will ever remain grateful to our beloved our teaching and administrative staff for their support. Thank you, one and all. Over to you, Vinay sir.
Thank you, Abhilash sir. Once again, thank you one and all. Now we conclude the webinar.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for joining with us. Thank you, Rama
Thank
madam.
you so much. Thank you.
We'll end the session now.